It's how things were 50 years ago. Businesses might hire a few blacks for menial backroom jobs, but outside of black neighborhoods, you wouldn't see them sitting at a desk or out front dealing with customers. There were commissions and talks and some progress, but a lot of people felt things just weren't going far enough, fast enough. And despite disagreements among activists over tactics, it was clear in 1963 that it could no longer be business as usual. Not in St. Louis, not in America. In August of that year, there was the March on Washington. But a lot of St. Louis's civil rights activists missed Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. They had stayed home to make their own history at Jefferson Bank, a protest organized by CORE, the Committee of Racial Equality.
It was the first time that we had had a major confrontation between the power structure, the in-group, the business community, and just the average African American.
Norman Say was one of the CORE leaders and a veteran of the local civil rights movement. For years, there had been marches and lunch counter sit-ins in St. Louis, and the city passed a public accommodations law in 1961. But now the battle was over jobs, and there were signs that civil disobedience was becoming somewhat less civil and more disobedient. Jefferson Bank officials knew that and had gotten a court order prohibiting demonstrators from interfering with bank business. And for a time, they did just march outside. But then at some point, some protesters went into the bank and others followed.
And we ask you, as officers and employees of this bank, to please leave our premises forthwith.
It was not planned to be more disruptive. It evolved into that.
What happened that day may not have been planned, but it wasn't unprecedented. Just a few weeks before, there had been a series of sit-ins at businesses in East St. Louis. The biggest one was at First National Bank. Protesters were arrested and carried out by police, but very quickly, a deal was cut. The bank agreed to hire on some black workers, and the city agreed to drop the charges. One of the CORE leaders told me years ago that some of the East St. Louis protesters came here to what was then Jefferson Bank. And while he and other CORE leaders were talking about what their next move might be, it was the veterans of the East St. Louis sit-ins who went into the bank. There may be other versions of exactly how it started, but what's more important is what happened next. Because in St. Louis there was no deal made, the judge ordered the CORE leaders arrested for violating the injunction, and that's what stoked the fire, getting others involved, including the late civil rights activist and attorney Margaret Bush Wilson.
That case mobilized all of us. That first day in Judge Michael Scott's courtroom, the walls were lined with black lawyers.
There were more demonstrations outside City Jail in support of the defendants, including Norman Say and City Alderman and future Congressman William Clay. And for months, protesters continued their pickets outside the bank until they began to see real change.
The demonstrations ended because the banking industry and other companies began employing African Americans. In fact, while we were in jail, companies were going out to the Urban League, the NAACP, to various social organizations, political organizations, and employing African Americans. And so that's how it ended.
Early the following year, Mayor Tucker's Employment Commission announced that since the previous summer, local banks had hired 84 Negroes into office, clerical, and training positions. And throughout the city, more than 1,000 blacks had been hired or put in training programs by all kinds of companies. 13 of them had never, ever before hired a black employee. For Stay Tuned, I'm Jim Kircher.